name is Francisco Moreira, and I will be moderating today's session. Okay, and thank you for giving some of your time today to share with us your experience, your doubts, your difficulties in implementing or planning connectivity projects. Okay, so some housekeeping rules. The session is being recorded, so please start and stop your video camera at your convenience. If possible, please help identifying yourself, displaying your name and institution. For comments, please use the chat box, and we do welcome a lot your thoughts, your opinions, and please remain muted during the presentations. So this is an overview of what we plan for today. So it's just 2 hours. So we start with 2 short presentations for you to give you the context on the project and on the connectivity component of the project. Then we split into breakout groups, and today's overall topic is identifying priorities for connectivity planning, and this is really the core of this, is where we want to listen to your ideas. Then we will come back again to plenary for reporting back, and we will end with a wrap-up and outlook for tomorrow's. Okay. So before continuing, I think Merit will, so that we know each other a little better. Merit is proposing a very short interaction with all of us, right?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everybody. Also from my side, my name is Marit Schnepp. I'm working for the Europark Federation, and as Europark Federation, we are also part of the NaturaConnect consortium. So because we are many people in the room, let's see who is here. And I would just like to ask everybody to close off your camera, and I will propose certain sectors and areas of work, and wherever it refers to you, please open back up your camera. You can also open up several times, it doesn't matter. But for now, yes, everybody close the camera, and yeah, to see who's here. So who do we have here from an NGO or civil society organization? If you come from that area, please open up your camera. Hello, nice to see some faces. Thank you. That's actually not such a big group than expected. Okay, so who do we have here from research or university sector? Okay, a couple of more people. Wow, yeah, that seems to be a bigger chunk. Welcome also to you guys. Thank you. Who do we have here from national, regional, or local administrations and authorities? Is there anybody from that field? Also, nice. Hello. Also some familiar faces. Welcome. Do we have anybody from the EU, from the European level, EU Commission, European Parliament, or even people working on policy? Nice. Hello, nice, thank you. Anybody from the private sector? Yeah, also a smart group. Wow, that's great. We have so many different people. That's really good to see. Lastly, I would like to ask everybody who is involved in the NaturaConnect directly in the project to open up their camera so that you also see who we are. Quite a lot of people also joining today. So yeah, that's all the NaturaConnect consortium. And with that, well, welcome again from my side, and I would like to hand over to Nestor for his presentation to introduce NaturaConnect.
Thank you very much, Marit. And while Marit shares the slides that I'm going to present, I want to thank you all for the participation. This is the first big online workshop that we are doing in NaturaConnect, and we, as I will explain in a minute, we really rely on the inputs from different groups of people to do our research. I am Nestor Fernandez. I am the co-coordinator of the NaturaConnect project. The project is coordinated by Piero Visconti in IASA, and I, as co-coordinator, I am based in IDIF in Germany. Yeah, let's start, Marit. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you know, a few years ago, the European Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 was proposed. Basically, three key aspects for the work that we are doing today is that Europe needs to protect legally at least 30% of the land, of which 1/3, that is 10% of the land, should be strictly protected. Restoration measures should be put in place in 20% of the land at least. And one very important aspect is that in this strategy, it explicitly mentions the need to enhance ecological connectivity and increase the resilience of the network to changes such as, for example, climate change. Next slide. What this biodiversity strategy for 2030 aims to tackle is the conservation problems that we still have in Europe. If you look at the European State of Nature report, at the latest one, you would find that around more than 50% of the species and more than 60%, or almost actually 70% of the habitats are in non-favorable condition. Half of the non-favorable are stable or deteriorating. This means that despite the Natura 2000 network has been in place already for many years, still many species and many habitats are deteriorating. Next. The situation right now is that Europe is covered in around 18% by Natura 2000 sites. Those are not the only protected areas in Europe. There are other protected areas that are nationally designated. And how this was created, how this network was established, was in a non-coordinated way, let's say. So it was a very strong effort put by the different member states over the years, but there was no real strong coordination in order to find where are gaps, conservation gaps at the European level, how can we better connect the sites and so on. This is precisely what our project is aiming to do. Next. So our project, NaturaConnect, is a consortium of 22 partner institutions from 12 different countries. And what we aim to do is to co-develop knowledge, tools, and capacity building to support member states in implementing the Trans-European Network. And the Trans-European Network should include both the extension of the Natura 2000 network, but also the implementation of corridors and better connected areas in order to make the network more resilient. Next. For that, we have the different blocks of research in the project and many interactions with different stakeholders and actors. So first of all, we have been developing participatory scenarios. That means assessing how people perceive that nature should change in the future in Europe, looking at multiple perspectives. So for example, looking at the preserving the intrinsic values of nature, increasing the value of nature for society, or increasing the cultural value of nature. So we already did some work on this with workshops with stakeholders, and we will be very soon launching publicly the results of this work. Next. A second component of the project is to do a spatial prioritization for expanding the EU nature network. This means where should we put new protected areas in order to better fill the gaps in conservation that currently exist. Next. And finally, and this is the topic of this workshop today, we want to do that not only looking at where the protected areas should be, but also how to better connect between existing protected areas and also the future protected areas. And a part of our outputs here and what we want to provide to member states and to all the public in Europe is a set of guidelines, data, and tools for connectivity conservation, addressing connectivity at multiple scales from local to pan-European, and also providing some ideas and some criteria for identifying restoration priorities to increase the resilience of the network. Next. When we speak about connectivity, we try to cover all the different definitions of connectivity because we are very aware that people have different preferences about how to better connect Natura 2000 sites and protected areas. So here are two definitions. For example, structural connectivity, which is overall connectivity that might be affected by infrastructure, intensive usage, etc. But we also are dealing with functional connectivity. This is how connectivity can help species or habitats in getting a better status, for example, through better connecting species populations so that dispersal is enhanced, or to enhance also the genetic flow between different populations. Next. Finally, in all our research, we do processes of stakeholder engagement at multiple levels. And for that, we also have several different study sites. So this is just to emphasize that the target of the project is both European scale, but also other scales. So for example, we have one study site in the Carpathians, which includes many different countries. And there we are specifically addressing issues of connectivity and protected area planning transboundary. We also have several different national scale study sites, and also subnationals, such as, for example, the Doñana region and the Leipzig-Halle peri-urban region. We are trying to learn from the study sites to provide this knowledge acquired to many different administrations and also at the EU level. Next. Okay, we can jump this one also. So we will give you instructions immediately about how you can participate in this workshop. Before that, I would like to emphasize that NaturaConnect is a project that really aims to get the opinion of many different people and many different sectors. For that, we have developed what is called the stakeholder community. This includes all the processes of participation of researchers and non-researchers in the activities of the project. So I encourage you to visit the stakeholder community. Just go to the NaturaConnect website and you will find there a link. Thank you. This is all from my side, and I will pass the word to Francisco Moreira. Francisco will be presenting the first results of an effort that we did already, checking how different connectivity projects have been addressed until now in Europe. Francisco, please.
Thanks a lot, Nestor. So next slide, please. So as Nestor said, in the scope of the project, we set a survey to collect information on ecological connectivity projects in Europe, and projects undertaken at different spatial scales. And the survey is basically divided into three sections, one with overall information, the other on the scope and the users of the project, and the third on the technical approaches used. And this is a relatively short inquiry, so it does not require too much time, like 15 minutes maximum. And the information from this inquiry will be used for two purposes. First, to produce a public repository of connectivity projects that can support knowledge sharing. And the second purpose is to help us drafting guidelines for connectivity assessment and implementation. And I want to use this opportunity to thank all of you, in particular the ones attending these workshops that have contributed so far to this survey. Next, Marit. So far we have identified a total of roughly 160 projects, a little bit more than half of these projects. We did manage to have information. And there is a link to this survey that should be pasted on the chat. And so for those of you that are involved in the connectivity projects and did not have the time to help us, please do so. We would appreciate that very much. Again, it's a relatively quick survey to fill. Okay. In the next couple of slides, I will show some general patterns of the information that we got so far. So in terms of biogeographic regions, as you see, most of the projects that we got information are from the continental, alpine, and Mediterranean regions. Next, Marit, please. So when we ask about the spatial scale of the project, as you can see, most of the projects are either at a subnational scale, so several administrative regions, or local scale, the third column there, covering one or several municipalities or related to a specific infrastructure, but as well some transboundary projects. Okay, next, please. When the connectivity goals of these initiatives are listed here. So the main goal is protected areas, connectivity, as well several projects relate to specific habitat types or the protection of multiple species, and less common projects targeting one species or what we call small landscape features, so at a more detailed spatial scale. Next, please. In case the project is focused on specific taxa, which taxa? The answer is mainly large carnivores, but as well birds and, interestingly enough, arthropods. Next. What does the project aim to enhance? And as you can see, the main patterns is that ecological corridors is the main objective, enhancing corridors, but as well ecosystem restoration or the expansion of the existing protected areas network. The increasing permeability of linear infrastructures is another major topic of several of these projects, and then less common adaptation to climate change, urban green spaces. Okay, yes, approaches. What approaches have you used? That was the question, and as you can see, mainly based on land cover, land use, a lot of expert-based, then analysis of infrastructures, and less common species distribution models, species movements, etc. So this provides a very quick overview of the type of information that we are gathering. And that's it from my side, I think. Merit, can you move? Yes, so this is the moment to break out and over to Nestor again.
Thank you. Yeah, I think since we did very well the presentations in time, at least, I think we can open for questions in case that someone has any question, either about the general purpose of the project or about the first results of the analysis of the connectivity projects that are being done in Europe right now. So please feel free to raise your hand. And we will be happy to answer your questions. Okay, if not, as we said at the beginning, feel free to paste your questions in the chat, and there will be people always answering the questions. So now, after this introduction, what we would like to do is to assess with all of you what are some of the priorities to plan for connectivity in Europe. And why we want to do this is because we think that in order to provide guidelines to member states and to the European Commission on planning for connectivity, we think that we need to get as many inputs as possible from diverse sectors and from people with very different perspectives. So what we are going to do in the next hour, more or less, is to work together with you addressing 5 different topics. One is species conservation, another is terrestrial and freshwater habitats generally. So the third is ecosystem processes and services. Fourth is protected areas and Natura 2000 sites. And fifth, it's urban and peri-urban areas specifically. So what we are going to address during those sessions is to identify together with you, for example, what are the key aspects of conservation that connectivity should support. So why is it important to do connectivity for supporting ecosystem processes and ecosystem services? Second question will be, what should we connect in terms of areas that need to be connected? Also, we will be asking, where should the corridors, or where should we implement better measures to increase connectivity between those areas in a way that we actually achieve the goal of protecting and restoring those attributes of biodiversity that are important. And finally, we will be asking about how to actually implement actions that support the increase in connectivity, or, for example, the development of ecological corridors. So those are questions that are going to be addressed through Miro boards in the different split-up groups. And what we ask you is to select one of the groups of your preference. And I would like to make here a small note of caution. I think that knowing what usually happens, I'm pretty sure that many people will go to species conservation. But please, if you are not sure, try to select a group that you may think that might have not so many people. We really need to get inputs, for example, for better connecting habitats, such as, for example, the habitats of the directives, and better connecting in order to support ecosystem services and nature contributions to people. So if you think you can contribute to those groups, I would encourage you to move to those groups also. So this is how we are going to work in the next hour. So I would like to open for questions here, just in case that someone didn't understand or need more clarification of what we are going to do and how we are going to split in the groups. In a minute, you will have the opportunity to join yourself to one of those 5 groups. Is there any question?
Looks like there's one question in the chat.
Okay, I cannot read the chat right now. Can you read for me, Jeremy?
Sure. This is Francisco Moore. I seem to remember that UNEP WCMC compiled an inventory of connectivity initiatives globally a while ago. Were you able to get some information from them on European initiatives?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that point. Yeah, so to reiterate the goal of this exercise today, so whatever inputs we are getting from all of you here, this will be used for developing a document which will be the connectivity guidelines for Europe. And all of you will be, of course, invited to comment on the document before the document is made public. Okay, so if there are no more questions, also not in the chat, I think, Marit, shall we split in groups already?
Yeah,
that's done.
sounds good.
Now there is a big challenge for the moderators or facilitators, so that in 2 or 3 minutes you can highlight what you think are some of the key ideas from your respective groups. And so maybe I will start, and let me check my notes, with the species conservation group, and I don't know if it will be Philippe or anyone else doing this attempt of summarizing some.
I would like to go last, please.
Okay, I accept that. So
Technical problems, sorry.
technical problems. Okay. Terrestrial and freshwater habitat. So habitats group, was it Jeremy?
It was. It was. Thank you, Francisco. Yeah, so much of our discussion, a lot of our discussion today, we're looking at, we're talking about the riverscape concept and maintaining those types of habitats and that cross-realm factors when it comes to connectivity in the terrestrial and freshwater sphere. Also discussed some on habitats that will take into consideration climate change shifts and not just beyond the current habitats that are in need of protection. And then we had really interesting contributions to different interventions for implementation and enhancing connectivity, both for pollinators, for bats, and then once again back in the freshwater realm, discussing removal of dams for freshwater connectivity, and then also fish ladders, and yeah, just all over, really exciting stuff.
Okay, you did it in 1 minute. So do you want to?
Do you want me to continue discuss?
Or
I think,
you have one
is
more
there-
minute if you want, or if you want
did
to.
I from the group? Did I miss anything that you want me to hit on real quick? And also the importance of habitats near urban areas that are often overlooked. That's an important factor as well. Okay, that was 30 more seconds.
Yes, thanks for that, Jeremy. Next group on ecosystem processes and services, Nestor. Is it Nestor?
Yeah, it's me. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Actually, we have a well-populated group at the end, contrary to what I expected, about 12 people, I think, and very, very interesting inputs. This is a particularly difficult topic of connectivity of ecosystem processes and services, I think, but we got very good ideas, for example, in terms of what outcomes should connectivity provide in terms of functions and services. There was a strong focus on supporting green and blue infrastructure and considering green and blue infrastructure as an integral part of connectivity planning and the connectivity conservation goals. There was also a diversity of ecosystem services mentioned. For example, it is important that connectivity contributes to services such as health and well-being, waterways connectivity. There was a very strong focus on resilience. So the outcomes of connectivity should be increasing resilience of the ecosystems. And also a couple of interesting comments that I liked from the screen personally. One was let ecological processes flow naturally, so that the connectivity in terms of ecosystem processes should actually allow for this. This is in the more theoretical aspect, let's say, when going more to the specifics of which areas should be connected. Yeah, what are the nodes of this connectivity network? So one, there were many different opinions there, some of them even contradictory, but all interesting. So one, for example, was that areas need to be big enough to support services, no matter if they are protected or not. But another comment said, well, we need to connect between small patches that are surrounded by highly intensively used areas, because those are patches that are particularly sensitive. So both approaches seem to be important. Another comment I wanted to highlight is that it is key to identify surplus areas that can be maintained only through connectivity, and this put us as a project and researchers in general as a challenge, which is identify which ecosystem services in reality would benefit from connectivity. Yeah, and that is not easy. For example, there was a discussion that, of course, when we are thinking about freshwater systems, many of the services, such as, for example, water purification or flood regulation and so on, they require connectivity. But carbon sequestration, is it something that really requires us to think in terms of connecting between different areas providing high carbon sequestration value? Well, it probably depends very much on the capacity of the ecosystems to maintain their functionality over long term, whether or not it is through connectivity. Then in connectivity areas,
30 seconds more, Nestor.
Thank you. One of the comments was connect high demand areas with provision. So this is, for example, urban areas with rural areas that have high nature value. So that this is related to the cultural service and recreation services. Also, multifunctional landscapes were identified as important for placing the corridors or increasing connectivity, and all ECMs. So those are other areas of conservation importance, and buffer areas around protected areas. And then we have a very long inputs about instruments. So this is probably the part that we got more inputs. A very important one was tap onto the agro-environmental schemes of the CAP to enhance connectivity in agricultural areas. But we have many, many more from a new law that is coming in Germany about compensation measures to removing the nature restoration law and many others. Thank you.
Thanks for the effort, Nestor. I know it's hard to summarize in just two minutes or three. Protected areas and Natura 2000 breakout group was Luigi.
Yeah, I'm here. Okay, I'll try to be quick. It was a fairly big group with over 20 people and a lot of comment, especially on a couple of the questions. Well, outcomes. So what we are expecting as outcome for Natura 2000 protected areas? Well, clearly there was a consensus on the fact that existing protected areas and Natura 2000 are the bulk of our conservation strategies, even when we do consider connectivity. But the main idea was that we should focus on natural dispersal and climate change. So the main focus of protected areas and Natura 2000 should be aimed at natural recolonization from species and habitat, and considering explicitly the framework of climate change. Not a lot restoration, not a lot reintroduction. Natural recolonization and climate change was the main point from basically everyone. Which areas? Well, again, existing protected areas should be connected. No question on this, especially when we focus on the areas that are more isolated from the others. Through which instruments? The focus here was on the other ecological conservation measures. So we should keep going with protected areas and Natura 2000 as the core of our conservation strategies, but connectivity should go through other ecological conservation measures. So areas managed and with some level of conservation, with some prescription locally, but not strictly protected areas. So connectivity should be outside of protected areas. Even though here we did have a very interesting comment speaking of basically a hierarchical system in which locally you have a big protected areas which is connected with other local protected areas nearby, and then we connect this local system with a general system, like a set of islands hierarchically connected in a bigger system. What measures? Here it was really tough. We basically got a lot of local intervention measure, and we are speaking about underpasses, overpasses, interesting dead trees. That was a really nice comment. So allow dead trees to remain there. And this is really important for the connectivity of a given set of species. And then we did have another completely different set of measures that is basically policies. So we get back to the European idea of planting, I don't remember how many, 5 billion trees in the next 20 years or so, to agriculture. Agriculture here was a really big point. So allow for traditional agriculture, lower pesticides, measures that allow species and habitat to use agricultural areas as connectivity.
Thanks. Looks quite interesting indeed. Thanks, Luigi. Then next is, well, it's myself. It's urban and peri-urban, and I will have to moderate myself. We had a group of 11, so not bad at all, and it was a very interesting discussion. I will try just to raise some of the topics sorry, I lost my notes. Yes, so first, in terms of, there was a lot of discussion about scale, and we thought that mostly planning at the local and regional scale is what makes sense when we are in urban and peri-urban context, but always pinpointing the surrounding areas in terms of existing areas of higher natural value. So the planning at the city and peri-urban level should aim what is around those areas. Okay, so one key bullet point: multifunctionality and ecosystem services, and I think this again relates to the green and blue infrastructure issues. So in urban and peri-urban contexts, the ecosystem services and the benefits for people are maybe more important than in any other context when we talk about ecological connectivity. So that was another important messages. And the rivers as the veins crossing urban and peri-urban. So river systems as a key area, both as to use as corridors and to improve connectivity when connectivity is degraded in these systems. Okay. Then there was an interesting idea on and an interesting discussion on using existing infrastructure crossing cities, and we're talking about roads, railway, whether they could be explored as well to create corridors like in road margins or other types of structures. And given the time, maybe I'll select another interesting discussion, which was about this one of whether the existing green areas and agricultural areas in particular in urban and peri-urban, whether they should be used for, let's call, rewilding. So we discussed different approaches for the currently existing green areas in cities, and even whether there should be incentives to, for example, a citizen to replace his swimming pool by a small woodlot, or even in some cases replacing what are currently agricultural small parcels in a rewilding context, or why not to invest in transforming parking lots into green areas. So lots of interesting and challenging ideas, and 3 minutes, that's what it is. And so meanwhile, I don't know if the first group managed to solve the technical issues, the one on species.
Yes, we have. Thank you. I'll be splitting the summary with Rafael. I had lots of connection issues throughout the meeting, so I wasn't able to follow a part of the discussion. So I'll start and then Rafaela will finish. As far as goals, the group mostly agreed that we should strive to avoid local extinctions and promote species movements and gene flow. Concerning question 2, which kinds of areas should be better connected, there was a bit of a consensus around protecting biodiversity hotspots and core breeding areas. And also there was an interesting comment about focusing on protected areas that have recently suffered some kind of disturbance, either by habitat destruction or habitat degradation. It was a comment that I found extremely interesting. Concerning question 3, they all agreed that we should focus on low friction areas, and also on that we shouldn't necessarily focus on making corridors cross protected areas, that we should strive to identify areas with high suitability for a corridor and not necessarily put them through protected areas. Concerning question 4, was a lot of discussion about creating ecological bridges, either over highway underpasses and overpasses, and was mostly focused around that. And we also have an interesting discussion concerning offshore wind farms. We found that offshore wind farms create really nice fish habitat, thus promoting fish connectivity. However, the fish can attract seabirds, which will start moving around offshore wind farms, and then they may be killed by wind farms. So there's a bit of a potential trade-off in this one. So I'll hand over the rest of the time to Rafaela for her to fill in the gaps that are left. Thank you.
One more minute,
Felipe.
Rafaela.
Yes, I think you targeted almost all, and I will try to summarize on a more general level. So from question 2, we also discussed that it really depends on the species we are focusing on and on the realms, of course, if this is species with areas or not, if there is invasive. So we also have to keep this really in mind, what the target is. And then I think the main point is that we have to consider the cumulative effects and impacts that are already acting on many species, or let's say different realms already now. And with the renewables extension and some changes in agricultural practices, intensification, this will be an even bigger challenge in the next 10 years. And we have to consider it now. And what we also discussed a bit is how our thinking was driven more theoretically from science or more from policies. And that's also a very important point, and that we need to communicate this cumulative impact aspects to the sectors we are working with, the ones that are causing some issues. So that is the main notes that I took, and that we have to rethink infrastructure also in terms of nature.
Okay, thanks a lot, Rafaela, for this. And I remind you or inform you that the Miro boards will be kept open until tomorrow, so that you may explain better the ideas that you have pasted there, or add new ideas, and that is really useful information for us. And I don't know if there is anything else crucial at this stage to remind you, but if there is, I'm sure Nestor or Merit will.
Yes,
I'll hand over to you, Nestor.
Thank you, Francisco. Yeah, I would like to thank you all for the day today. This is a 2-day workshop. I hope you can see my screen. Can anyone confirm?
We can.
Excellent, thank you. So, and this is a 2-day workshop. We wanted to keep this very short, very focused, do it all in 2 days. So we really hope that you can participate also in day 2. And how we are transitioning to day 2. So now today we got the priorities for planning connectivity. In day 2, then what are the needs in terms of information, in terms of techniques, in terms of data? For addressing connectivity, for assessing connectivity at the European level, and also for implementing connectivity, because we are very aware that there is a lot of lack of knowledge that the member states would like to have, the member states in Europe, and also the European Commission, and also the regions, in order to plan for connectivity themselves and to get support from the scientific community and from the other communities. So tomorrow we will start with success case presentation. We will hear about the transnational connectivity planning in the Carpathians, and this will be a talk by Christian Papp from WWF Romania. WWF Romania is one of the partners, one of the NGO partners in NaturaConnect. And then after that talk that I hope will be very inspiring, we will work again like today in breakout groups, and we'll spend again around 60 minutes in those groups addressing what are the challenges and the gaps for connectivity planning and for connectivity analysis in Europe. And this is not just a technical question. Of course, it is technical in a part, but we really encourage people that even don't have a technical background to attend, because it is also about the general gaps in knowledge. Yeah, so it's not only the general gaps in what methods we should be using or what specific data, but also the knowledge that we have in order to implement connectivity. And we'll be like today, we'll divide in different groups. One will be on multifunctional corridors, another on sociocultural opportunities and barriers, another one on the specific design of corridors for species and habitats, and finally on human infrastructure and impacts like today. Final note before closing, let me stop sharing here. I just pasted a link in the chat. It is for an evaluation. So those of you that are attending tomorrow, please wait to click that link until tomorrow. Yeah, we'll do it tomorrow. But those that cannot join tomorrow for whatever reason, would be very grateful if you can fill the evaluation. It only takes 1 minute, and it helps the project also to understand how relevant our activities. And with this, I would like to close the session today. We, the project, the NaturaConnect, really appreciates your inputs. As I said, you will get our summaries, and you will be able to comment. And those of you that can attend tomorrow, please join us tomorrow in the same link. Okay, welcome everyone. I see that people is still joining. Thanks for attending this second day of the workshop on ecological connectivity organized by the H2020 project, Horizon Europe project, NaturaConnect. And we are going to give 1 more minute to people to join. So thank you for waiting. Okay, I think we can start. Thank you again to all the participants. I see that we have already nearly 60 participants after a very well attended day yesterday also. This is a welcome to all of you that joined today, but also to the new ones. Yesterday we had a very good session assessing what are the goals of ecological connectivity in Europe, and how, what kind of information and what kind of priorities should we have in mind in order to plan for ecological connectivity across Europe, but also at national scales and subnational scales. Today, the discussion will be more focused on the gaps of knowledge that we have for planning for connectivity. This information is very important to support the creation of information that can then help member states of the European Union and the European Commission, and also authorities and bodies at subnational levels, to identify and cover those information gaps. So first of all, an introduction from myself. I am Néstor Fernández. I am the co-coordinator of the NaturaConnect project. This is an Horizon Europe project with around 22 partner institutions, which has the mandate to develop knowledge and support tools for supporting the implementation of the Trans-European Nature Network through Europe. Some housekeeping rules for the workshop today. The session is being recorded, so in case that you don't want yourself to be recorded, please stop your video camera at your convenience. Help identifying yourself by displaying your name and institution in your profile. Use the Zoom chat box, so we will be very happy. There is a number of people that participates in the NaturaConnect project here. We will be very happy to answer your questions. For that, please use the chat. Of course, for the presentations, we will give also the opportunity for people to ask in voice. And we kindly ask you to keep your microphones muted during the presentations. So, as I said before, this is the second day of the workshop. We will continue discussing for a couple of hours the needs for connectivity planning in Europe. But before that, I wanted to give a very short overview of what we did yesterday and what were some of the main outcomes. So yesterday, we discussed it together with many different types of people, let's say, of stakeholders, if you allow me to use this word, on the desired connectivity outcomes, but also on the planning priorities. Yeah. So what are the priorities for connectivity planning in Europe? For example, so what we did, we divided the groups in 5 different split up rooms. One was about the species conservation, and we asked the question, okay, if the main goal of connectivity planning is to conserve species, then what are the desired outcomes and how should we do that? Yeah. In the group, some of the desired outcomes were, for example, that connectivity should support the long-term persistence of species at large scale, increase or support the genetic exchange among populations, buffer against disturbances so that we can better protect species and populations, and also increase the abundance of species populations. Now, if we shift a little bit the focus, instead of focusing on species, looking at the conservation of habitats, such as, for example, the habitats listed in the directives, some of the goals or the outcomes that were identified were increased ecosystem integrity, the ecosystem services, increased biodiversity in agricultural landscapes. This is something that appeared a couple of times. And also that connectivity should be able to support in shifts of habitats in the climatic niches. So when we look instead of species or specific habitats at the ecosystem level, some additional desired outcomes arise, such as, for example, enhance ecosystem processes underpinning services, make a good spatial match through corridors of ecosystem service supply and demand, and was very prominent that we need to generate green and blue infrastructure together with ecological corridors and increases in connectivity. When the focus is in protected areas, such as, for example, the Natura 2000 network, some of the most important outcomes that came were prevent island effects, generate stepping stones, resilience in the context of climate change, and also balance the coexistence between nature protection in protected areas and people. And finally, the other topic was on peri-urban environments. So what are the desired outcomes in those environments? And among those, some of the answers were prevent isolation of green spaces in and around cities. Cooling down of cities should be an outcome that is desired when, for example, planning for corridors. Support high biodiversity levels in peri-urban areas, and also connect cities to the broader nature network. Now, in terms of connectivity planning, for example, if you focus on species, we found that it is important to connect species habitats separated by infrastructure, ensure that with corridors, we ensure that populations recruit individuals, support stopover sites, and design corridors through low friction areas, such as, for example, low intensity use areas or semi-natural landscapes. And okay, so we identified similar things for different focuses of ecological connectivity. For example, in the conservation of habitats, it was very mentioned quite often that riversides, coastlines, and wetlands are very important habitats to better connect. When we look at the ecosystem level, some of the responses we got is that big areas are important to connect, no matter whether they are protected or not. But also certain small mosaic patches, for example, embedded in agricultural areas. And it is important, again, to design corridors according to their capacity to provide multiple ecosystem services, but also connect areas of supply and demand. For protected areas, some of the participants identified that all Natura 2000 sites should be actually connected, although there is also a preference for selecting priority areas in those with high biodiversity areas. And corridors should use not only low intensity use areas, but also green belts and other ecosystem conservation, other areas of interest for ecosystem conservation, not necessarily the protected ones. And when we are looking to peri-urban environments, it could be important to connect rural and urban areas, integrating green infrastructure in cities. Okay, so this is mostly the results from day one. In day two, that is today, what we are going to do is go a little bit more in deep on what do we need in order to do that connectivity planning. And we will explain a little bit later exactly what are the topics that we will discuss. I only want to advance that today we will also divide in split up groups. Some will focus on species and habitats conservation, defining habitats as habitat types, such as, for example, those contained in the Habitats Directive. Another group will look more holistically to multifunctional corridors and connections for being able to support green and blue infrastructure. And other groups will look at challenges and opportunities given by interaction with people and also in relation to intensively used agricultural areas, peri-urban areas, etc. But before that, we are going to have a presentation today. I am very pleased to be able to give this presentation, to give the word now. Sorry, 1 second. I just need to find the introductory, the introduction for the presentation. Okay, so we are going to hear about one study case. This is the transnational connectivity planning in the Carpathians. Today, our presenter will be Christian Papp. Christian is a PhD in biology with a very large experience in large carnivore conservation. And he has more than 20 years of experience in biodiversity conservation at different levels, national and international levels. He is currently manager of the Wildlife and Landscapes Department of WWF Romania, which is one of the partner institutions of NaturaConnect. And he's also an associate lecturer at the Babes Bolei University of Cluj-Napoca. He's involved in several international networks, including, for example, the IUCN Commission on Protected Areas, the Infrastructure and Ecology Network Europe, and Global Wildlife Connect Initiative. Okay, with this, I would like to give the word to Christian. Is Christian in the room?
Yes. Hi, Nestor.
Thank you. Hi, thank you very much. It is a real pleasure to have you. We'll hear your presentation, and thank you very much again.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can, but we don't see the presentation mode yet. Yeah.
Not yet.
So.
Okay, just a second so that I can make it full screen. Are the slides moving?
Excellent. Yes.
Okay, super. So I can start.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, in the following time, going to tell you more about our connectivity initiative in the Carpathians. And this is very briefly what I'm going to talk about. But first of all, for all those who are not familiar with the Carpathian ecoregion, this is the map. And it is important to know that the Carpathian mountains are shared by 7 countries, and we call them Carpathian countries. And this is where we are actually focusing our connectivity efforts. When we are talking about the Carpathians, we are also talking about large-scale intact forest habitats, for instance, and also about a huge diversity of species, including the 3 large carnivore species, the brown bear, gray wolf, and the Eurasian lynx. And here you have the figures. And talking about the brown bear, for instance, as you can see, we are having most of the brown bears actually from the Carpathians, and well, some 40% of the total bear population from Europe. Of course, the other 2 large carnivore species are also well represented in the Carpathians and in Romania. When asking the protected area administrations about the threats they are facing, habitat fragmentation is pointed out as being one of the highest threats, and this can be seen actually in this graph. So this is why we started more than 10 years ago to focus part of our work on connectivity conservation. And talking about threat fragmentation is caused by the development of linear transport infrastructure, for instance, tourism development. Then we're also having urban expansion, wood harvesting, and so on. So basically, we are talking about more types of threats to our natural habitats and species. In terms of the aim of our work, we are actually focusing our activities to maintain and or improve the connectivity in the Carpathian region, mostly through a collaborative and participatory approach. And in terms of objectives, we managed already to design the ecological network for large carnivores. We are strengthening the capacity to identify ecological corridors among key stakeholders, and to also come up with some strategic direction so that we can make sure that most of our or the most critical ecological corridors in the Carpathians are protected. Regarding the methodology that we used, we collected data regarding the presence of the 3 large carnivore species, and here you can see the number of occurrence locations that we identified across the ecoregion. So we used many observation points. We also performed different analyses, including GIS analyses. We were looking at the habitat suitability for the 3 species. Then we tried to come up with some drafts, let's say, for the ecological network. And in order to validate it or to make improvements, we collected data from the field by using camera traps, by also registering the different tracks of the animals that we identified during the transects that we made. We also used the telemetry data, and here, for instance, you can see the route of a bear that was captured in Romania, close to a settlement. And this was relocated in a national park, and in about 3 weeks, he managed to actually cross the border and go to Ukraine. Unfortunately, we lost the traces of this bear since then. And yeah, we actually proved that again, because we also did it several times before with the color that we use, that the bears are highly mobile and using the landscape at a large extent. We're also looking at the cumulative effect of different threats, and this is an example of 5 threats, for instance, highway, river, railway, European roads, and also electric fences. And these types of threats are actually impeding the movement of wildlife across the landscape. And unfortunately, when proposing development project by different bodies, the problem is that this cumulative impact is not assessed, and most of the conclusions are actually saying that there is no major impact on the environment, which is sad, and we would like to change that. And we started to do it by working closely with all relevant institutions involved in spatial planning. We are involving all categories of key stakeholders, from shepherds and farmers to ministers of environment across the region. We are organizing different consultation meetings. During the pandemic, we heavily used Zoom meetings for that. And in terms of some of the results, we developed a methodology which is a harmonized tool basically across the Carpathians. We felt the need to come up with this approach because when we wanted to pull together all the available information, it was simply not really possible because of the difference in data collection, in approach, in modeling corridors, and so on. And this is why we developed this methodology. In addition, if we compare our approach to the classical one, you can see that the ecological corridors were actually split in more categories. So we are having also the ecological corridors in the classical sense, but we are also identifying critical connectivity areas and critical connectivity sectors so that we can better prioritize what it should be conserved and what not immediately. This is important because only in Romania, for instance, we identified thousands of ecological corridors, and you cannot protect all of them. And this is why our approach to try to come up with some prioritization in this respect. And here you can see the overall network of ecological corridors and the components of the ecological network in the Carpathian ecoregion. And we are also having an interactive GIS tool. You can find the website in the upper part of the slide. Also, we developed a decision support tool so that the investors can assess their potential impact on the environment, on protected areas, and on the ecological corridors that we identified. And this is also good for the institutions dealing with spatial planning. Then we are having an international action plan developed for the conservation of large carnivores and for ensuring ecological connectivity in the Carpathians. And this was adopted by the Carpathian Convention. So it's basically used also for developing new projects in the field of large carnivores and connectivity conservation. Then there are some other tools and publications that we developed, including wildlife and traffic in the Carpathians. We also contributed to a global strategy for sustainable transport and so on. Then in terms of capacity building, we also developed some online training courses, which are actually freely available for all those who want to identify corridors or are interested to learn more about how to harmonize connectivity and spatial planning. We have a dedicated app for collecting roadkill incidents. And here, for instance, you can see some of the most critical, let's say, areas or intersections between infrastructure and ecological connectivity. And on the right side, you can see the impact on the road by the groups of species. Of course, mammals are more easily to spot on the road. This is why, the graph on the right side is somehow biased, but still it shows the impact that the road network is having on wildlife in general. We have a dedicated app to gather information from the connectivity important areas. And this was, again, widely used in the Carpathian ecoregion. And some of our flagship species that dealt with ecological connectivity started with transgreen, continued with conegreen, and then sage green, which ended at the beginning of this year. We identified several projects in terms of synergies with our topic, and we exchanged information with the representatives of these projects. We are also having a broad cooperation with other professional networks, including IUCN, for instance, or Infrastructure and Ecology Network Europe, Carpathian Convention as well. And here are some of the recommendations and conclusions from the Carpathians. First of all, it's important to involve all key relevant all the key or relevant stakeholders in order to address the most important issues in a targeted way. Then to learn that borders should not represent actually a barrier, but rather an advantage in order to improve the generation of solutions at the transboundary level. The transdisciplinary approach is something that it should be widely used in order to tackle complex issues such as connectivity, conservation. And there are many other recommendations that we consider that are very, very important, basically, to make sure that connectivity is on the agenda, let's say, of the decision makers as well. Thank you very much for the attention, and let me know if there are questions.
Thank you, Christian. It has been a very, very inspiring showcase of how this can be addressed, how connectivity can be analyzed and also brought to policy making in such a difficult transnational context. So we are going to open the floor for questions, but let me first of all ask you one question myself. So if you had to ask for, or you were given the opportunity to ask for one single wish of what piece of information you would like to have or to be able to gather in order to better inform on connectivity planning in the Carpathians region, what would be that single wish that you would have?
Well, thanks for the question. I would be interested, for instance, to see what is the available capacity in the Carpathian countries for dealing with connectivity, because we are seeing that there is little competence, in different environmental authorities in the Carpathian, which is quite sad. And of course, what I presented sounds good, but in practice, when you are trying to come up with some practical solutions and measures for different ecological corridors, then you can see that there are different obstacles, to implement some other recommendations. And this is coming actually from the lack of capacity in the environmental authorities. Then there is also a lack of cooperation between the different sectors. For instance, if you are bringing at the same table people from environment, spatial planning, transport, and so on, each of them understands connectivity in a different way. So it's quite hard sometimes to harmonize, let's say, the solutions, or it takes quite a long time in order to have some concrete agreements. So I think that, it would be really nice to have this, let's say, overall situation of the capacity so that we can address the immediate needs in order to improve the situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
In terms of data, as you could see, we have plenty of data available from our project. So I believe that data is not necessarily a problem, but rather how this data is actually used by decision makers in order to make sure that we secure connectivity in the region.
Okay, we have one question from Christian Christodolo. I hope I spelled your name correctly.
Yeah, no, that's as good as I do with it. So thank you. And cheers, Christian. That was a really interesting talk. I just wasn't sure. I'm based up in Scotland. We have no large carnivores. And I wasn't sure if you had the opportunity to look at how well the connectivity designed for large carnivores might meet the needs of connectivity for other taxonomic groups or for the kind of breadth of habitats across the Carpathian region, and so whether or not this kind of keystone or flagship species could really help for connectivity across the board.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, this was the reason why we selected large carnivores as target species, because they are umbrella species. And when collecting data, we actually were looking also at the prey species, for instance. We were looking to herbivores, to mid-sized mammals, and so on. And we collected also this data that is, well, indirectly, let's say, relevant to our work. And we confirmed that the ecological corridors that we identified as being relevant for large carnivores are also used by several other species, especially by mammals, mid-sized mammals, including golden jackal, foxes. Then we are having all herbivores actually on the trapping cameras in the connectivity in the critical connectivity areas and so on. So yeah, I can confirm that what we identify in the end is actually confirmed also by other species. I also want to add that this was actually a long process of fine-tuning the methodology. And it took us almost 2 years, let's say, to come up with the network of ecological network. And we were also involving international specialists, national specialists. And I think that more than 95% of the results, when talking about the ecological network, is actually validated through the consultation processes that we had. So even if we could not cover the entire Carpathian region, by collecting data, by deploying camera traps and so on, at least we have the validation of the stakeholders that what we identify is actually correct.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Is there any other question?
No.
Let's start with a group of Luca and the rest on species and habitats connectivity.
Okay, do you want me to share the screen, or I can just go through the notes?
You have about 3 minutes or so do whatever you prefer. Yeah.
Okay, very quickly. Okay, so my breakout room was the enhancing connectivity for endangered species and habitat. It was a quite active conversation. So the first question was what data is needed to implement connectivity project, and so there were several comments on the lack of distribution data, occurrence points or absence points, and habitat distribution, but most even worse, the data on the dispersal of species, which refer to both distances, propagated pressure, mortality during dispersal, and dispersal path, so where actually animals move. So tracking data, basically. Also, type of data we may need is pressures on species. So not just barriers, that's definitely one, but also like any type of disturbance that may alter, for example, the movement pattern of species. And then there was also a comment on population parameters. So population dynamics locally, not just species level information, but also population level information. And habitat management information. So how the different habitats or different areas are managed. So the following point was what critical information gaps we receive, and again, of course, was dispersal, which is the main gap of information. So how actually animals move, and also scale of perception. So not just how much animals move or where and how, but also how far animals perceive obstacles or resources and so on, which may be, for example, important information if you're developing a mechanistic model of connectivity. And then tools for designing multi-species connectivity. So this was perhaps maybe out of topic, but still, I mean, if we are focusing on different endangered species or habitats, so the point was, how do we account for the different all this different information in the same framework, in the same tool. Barriers to disturbance, okay. So again, we don't know what is actually affecting the different species. Historical data on species movements and distribution, so how things have changed over the last decades or so. And high resolution mapping data relevant for connectivity. So the point here was, we don't, in many cases, we won't have movement data, but we may have good high resolution data, which may be good proxies of animal movements, but sometimes we simply don't have this data either. Then we had technical challenges and guidance to constrain connectivity design. Here, one point that emerged in several occasions was computationally efficient methods for connectivity models, because so it was pointed out that as soon as you have a large network and many different nodes in the network, then the computational effort required for running these models is extremely high, and sometimes it's prohibitive to assess an entire network altogether, or to run different, because sometimes it's not just assessing the network once, but like running different scenarios, and this requires a lot of computational effort, which may be a limiting factor. Validation of connectivity models, so independent data on animal movements, not just those that we use to train the model, but also something that it can be used as a test for the assessment. Different complex model coming from different conclusions. So another point was, sometimes different methods point to different solutions or to different scenarios, and so how do we make sense of these divergent scenarios or outcomes or results? And then there was a point which is probably more relevant for the next one. I will discuss that later. Lack of mechanistic models to run these assessments, and prioritization algorithm that account for global connectivity. So the point that was made is prioritization algorithm that account for connectivity focus on connectivity at local scale. So how the addition of one cell, for example, may enhance the connectivity locally, but for example, because it's connected to other patches, but it doesn't tell us about the overall connectivity of the network, how every modification will affect the overall network connectivity, which probably is connected also to the computational efficient method for connectivity models.
Okay, then, thank you, Luca. I think thank you. I think we need to move to the next, because we are short of time. Yeah, thanks a lot. It seems that you have a really technical discussion there. It's very interesting. So I think I'm the next on the multifunctional connectivity. I'll share. Actually, what I'm going to share is the Miro board and go very quickly. So we started with the question of what data is needed to implement connectivity projects. And there was a lot of emphasis here on socioeconomic data, so such as, for example, socioeconomic interests to avoid conflicts, but also biological data on species needs, and monitoring data on effective monitoring over time. Also, when we move to what critical information gaps did people perceive, again, there was a very strong emphasis on social economical information, such as, for example, what is the perception of people at local scales, because this is an important aspect to consider when planning corridors, and particularly when we are speaking corridors that are providing both services to people and to biodiversity. Very prominent was the need for fine resolution information, both on biological aspects, such as, for example, data on pollinators distributions. Even the most basic data is missing for making some of the most important analysis, but also fine scale data on the management of the land and the land tenure as well. Yeah. There was also one comment saying, well, one of the important information gaps that we perceive is standardization across the scales and regions so that connectivity analysis can be done in a similar way, no matter what the scale you are dealing with. Third, we asked about what technical challenges and guidance constrain connectivity. One interesting comment here is multi-level governance, planning and management of connectivity, because this is actually that involves very different levels of governance from national, but particularly local levels and subnational levels. We should not be thinking about multiple corridors for different species, different ecosystem services, or different nature contributions to people, but we actually need to have one single framework that can accommodate all the different needs, because it is not realistic, particularly when we think at large scales, to plan for corridors for each of those components. Then when we move on how to plan for connectivity in the face of climate change, we have here really a lot of inputs, perhaps the area where we have more inputs. One of the comments was linking, we need to link multiple environmental gradients. We need to connect coastlines with mountains, and we need to plan with the idea of adaptive planning and adaptive management, accounting for flexibility. So taking into consideration that when the conditions change, the plans will need to change. And it's not only about projecting today for the future, but also being prepared to change the plans in the future. And finally, I will only highlight one comment in the other challenges, needs and solutions, was this suggestion to have to deliver methodologies and cases that can actually inspire multiple administrations, so regions can learn from other regions on connectivity planning. So I will stop here, and I will give the floor to the second group of multifunctional connectivity.
Yeah, thank you, Nestor. I can start, and Miguel, if you agree, you just add some more comments. I also quickly will share my screen. So we discussed also this aspect. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Great. So we also discussed this planning and management of multifunctional corridors, but we almost had a philosophical discussion in the beginning in our mixed group of planners, scientists, and so on. What are multifunctional corridors? So we looked at it species or community-wise from ecological perspective, but then also in terms of human needs and purposes. And in terms of data needed, this also shows this twofold approach. On the one hand, more on species data, radio tracking, gene flows, and so on, data on environment, on livestock, but then it goes into wildlife conflicts, roadkills, and so on. Habitat suitability, of course, land use and coverage, but also bioeconomy data that should be considered. And an important aspect that especially the Portuguese colleagues brought in is land tenure. So information about land ownership that gives you already a hint about the applicability of measures. In terms of information gaps, of course, biological values and biodiversity data, this is very critical aspect across all countries and regions, that only on single species or communities there is information, but multi-species information, for example, is often not present. Quantifiable ecosystem services also often is not there. And then again, aspects like local climate data or also harmonized transboundary information. That was an issue here. Technical challenges is, of course, how to harmonize available data of different resolution for different scales, but also, of course, people who are more into planning already raised this fundraising for the implementation of measures. So not only for the planning, but thinking already now when you do the planning for implementation. I think also scenario planning with some visions. So what are the visions in terms of scenario planning? And then in terms of climate change, on the governance level, there were a lot of discussions that there is often missing some biodiversity aspects in the climate adaptation mainstreaming, so that biodiversity considerations have not really went into policies and governance, but we need to combine biodiversity and climate data to identify, for example, climate refugees and corridors. And then in terms of challenges and needs, I'm just picking up on some, the co-management of different policies, normatives and regulations that also have to be adopted. Very often departments in administration are still have their silo views. So city biodiversity conservation does not have any rights to say something in water management, for example, and so on. So a lot of governance issues also identified here. Miguel, do you quickly want to add one or two aspects?
Thank you. No, you said it well. I just want to mention one last comment that was made in our group, which was a bit sobering. Do we need more data and more complex scenarios and indicators? Reality requires simple solutions that can be explained and implemented to stakeholders. So thank you. Also.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So we move to the next group on the socio-ecological barriers and enablers. Who was in the group? It was you, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, it was me. So there we go. So yeah, ours was quite, we weren't following the same questions as the previous groups. So we were looking at what those social cultural barriers and challenges that we face, policy, and then also policy opportunities that we can leverage, data deficiencies. So we found several, there was a plethora of different types of challenges, from resistance from at multiple scales of landowners and policymakers, but then also policies that are very general and difficult to apply locally. And then also the aspects of having highly decentralized conservation decision-making, where locals are potentially, it's difficult to get everybody on board for larger landscape planning. Just for sake of time, when it came to data deficiencies, there's actually a lot of similarities with Nestor's group. So lack of data on people's perceptions of potential conflicts, and then aspects of socioeconomic data that's missing, and then also lack of interactive spatial tools for stakeholders to be interacting with when it comes to learning and for greater capacity within the public. And then we also had several different types of special activities. One that we continually hit on was the importance, of course, with communication with stakeholders from the very beginning. So that's building trust and a plan for that type of engagement from the beginning as well. And then one that I really liked and we discussed was about local champions. So finding people in the community that can really be champions and are trusted in the area to assist you in meeting your goals. So I'll wrap it up there just for time and toss it to Francisco.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeremy. So now Francisco on the last group on human infrastructure and land use impacts.
Okay, I will also share the screen as overall guidance for so that you see the questions. Okay, and I'll promise 2 minutes, 3 max. I'm timing myself. So several interesting questions. The first, how to identify priority areas. There were different perspectives. One very pragmatic one saying, let's focus between areas that have a high biodiversity potential, and it's the area between these that should be the priority to increase ecological permeability. Okay. Others say select areas where there is a high frequency of movement of species. So based on species movements, in the context of infrastructures, linear infrastructures, at least the ones causing mortality, of course, using mortality registers can be pinpoint which areas should be priority for increasing ecological permeability. And last but not least, let's not forget that some linear infrastructures like roads or power lines can themselves be used as to increase connectivity. So road margins or managing the areas under power lines as ecological corridors, okay? In terms of the second question, critical information gaps, species movements and dispersal from the technical side, but as well, what is the process of decision-making by planning authorities? It's one type of information that we still don't have, and that participants felt that it was important. Okay, the types of pressures that are more relevant, nothing new there. So industry, intensive agricultural areas, urban, and the transport infrastructures are the key sources of major pressures at different spatial scales. The technical challenges, there were different ideas, but they were mostly policy ideas. So in terms of, there is a lack of guidance in terms of the policy, of the legislation, of the lack of sectoral integration, how to manage corridors and connectivity. There was also a mention to the lack of training material. And finally, the need for access to data coming from the environmental impact assessment studies and monitoring that can be an important source of data that could help in connectivity design, taking into account human infrastructures. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I could keenly ask you to stay with us 5 more minutes. So right now, it is very important for us to understand what do you think about this workshop, yeah? So you can evaluate this workshop. So it helps for us to plan future ones. So I want to now give the word to Sofia Caiolo. She's from ETI4. So who is going to present some questions for doing this evaluation. Sofia, please.
Thank you very much, Nestor. So I'm Sofia Caiolo. I'm a facilitator and I work for ETI4. So ETI4 is here to support Europark for the stakeholder engagement evaluation for the NaturaConnect project. And we decided to divide the evaluation in 2 parts. One first is collectively, and we will do it now together. And then there will be one individual for which we will send you a questionnaire that you will do it at home with your time. And it takes only 5 minutes and you will help us a lot. So there are no right or wrong answer. As you know, it's an evaluation, so everything is welcome, and it would be super useful to have your contribution. So to do that, we will use Mentimeter. I guess you know it, but in any case, I'm going to share my screen. So just a second. Voila, voila. Okay, so please go to menti.com, www.menti.com. The code is 73832565. My colleague Giacomo has just sent it in the chat. So we wait for you there. When you arrive there, please click on the cat so that we are so that we see that you are there and that everything is working. I see that there are 4 people. We give you 1 minute since you are quite a lot of people to connect, and then we start. Okay, I see lots of cats coming up. So you are there. Okay, we are 21 for now. Let's see if someone else will connect. 25. If you have any problem, you can write in the chat. Or also activate your microphone. In any case, I see that there are 31 people connected, so very good. I see lots of cats coming, very good. Okay, we waited the last second just to have everyone on board. We are 35. Yeah. Okay. Yes, I see that only externals can make the evaluation, just to be clear. We are 33. We wait the last seconds, and then we start. So this is a general evaluation for these 2 days to see your level of engagement during the workshop. So let's start. You can enter also during the exercise, the evaluation. So don't worry if you're not there now. Okay, so first question is an easy one, just to get into the mood of evaluation. So after the 2-day NaturaConnect workshop, how do you feel? Exhausted, tired, normally good, satisfied, enthusiastic? So let's see. We have 14, 17 answer. 4 enthusiastic. Okay. Okay, so this is the first I see. Yeah, we are almost all there. Okay, so there is a good bunch of you that is satisfied about these 2 days. So very, very good. And 4 also enthusiastic. So let's go to the next question, which is more inspirational. So how was the 2-day NaturaConnect workshop? Say it in 2 words. So we wait your words to describe these 2 days that you have spent together. Okay, complex, knowledge, challenging, inspiring, discussion, interactive, engaging. Okay, I see that there was lots of inspiration during these 2 days. Informative, it's also stimulating, engaging, complex. Okay. Inspiring and informative seems the most quoted one. Also interesting. Okay, we wait for the last persons. Okay. Okay, so I feel that the informative, inspiring, interesting, and complex are the most quoted words, and this is our words of the 2 days. Now let's go a bit into the topic, and for this we will ask you to reply to this sentence in a ranking way. So the 10, you will see a Likert scale. From 1 is I don't agree, and to 10 is I totally agree. So first, let's concentrate on the time. So do you believe that the time between informative and participatory session was well balanced? And the time dedicated to participatory session was enough to make my voice heard? So maybe it was balanced, but it was not enough time, or maybe it was like up to you. So I see that people are contributing. As you can see, I can also show a bit the ranking. Okay. Okay, so this was the first to get into the topic of engagement and participatory session. For the second one, we have 3 other questions that you can evaluate in the same way. The first one is focus on content. So if the topic addressed during the breakout rooms triggered a good discussion, they were well addressed. Then the methodologies. So the methodologies and questions raised during the breakout rooms facilitated my active participation. For instance, I saw some Miro board which support usually participation. So this is also part of these questions. And then safe space. So did I feel comfortable, free to express my opinions? Was the atmosphere good enough to feel relaxed and feel like that my voice could be heard? 10 is the maximum and 1 is the minimum. So go ahead. I see that there are many questions. Okay. I can also show you a bit the vote. Okay. So now focus on these 5 sentences, which like you gave some ranking about this, and let's go a bit in deep. So with your words, with how many answers you would like to add, tell us what are the factors that facilitate your interaction and participation. So what support, what was well done and make you participate the most? So you can add how many answers and replies you would like to add. So go ahead. These are open questions. Be concise but clear. Okay, the work of the moderators. The group was small. Well done with the mirror boards, explaining own thoughts on the sticky notes. Okay. You can add more than 1 reply, so go ahead. We will then save all your answers. Okay, we have open discussion, level of expertise of the participants. Mirror board is expressed as a good tool for support participation. Moderator communication skills, the technology used, moderators. Moderators seem to have done a very good job. Congratulations. Okay, so we wait for the last answers and replies. And then we go to the last question of this collective evaluation. So for this, we would like to ask you, okay, now we resonate on what works, but what could be improved and revised, add to facilitate your interaction for the next time? So now we concentrate on the good part. Let's see what could have been done a bit better or revised or to facilitate your participation. As before, you can reply how many times you would like to. Okay, so a bit less question, deeper debate. Prior knowledge on the questions would allow for better preparation. Okay, more time to focus on the single questions, but the overall time was good. More time to focus. Okay, everything was fine. The sticky board allowed me to interact and participate. Okay. Hard to answer, as I thought it was great. Very good. Okay. I give you the last second to reply. Okay. In situ is better. Yes. To always facilitate in presence activities, but it's not always possible. Okay. Okay. So this was the last question of our collective evaluation. I thank you very much for your time, and also Merit and Nestor to giving us the space for this evaluation. I ask you As I told you before, we divided this evaluation in 2 parts. So this was a collective one, and now you have the link for an individual one. Giacomo, my colleague, just sent it also in the chat. So you can do it afterwards. It takes only 5 minutes, but it's very useful for us. So I thank you, everyone, and I pass the floor to Nestor for the closing remarks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And I am very aware that we have passed the time planned for this workshop. I want to give a very, very big thanks to all of you for participating. I think that we got a lot of inputs that now we need to analyze. We will produce a report during the next few weeks, and we will share with you the mirror boards as well. The mirror boards are open until the end of the day. So for those of you that would like to add more comments, and then you have more time to reflect, let's say. And I would also like to emphasize that NaturaConnect is a lot about engaging with different types of actors, stakeholders in our research activities. So I encourage you to sign in to our stakeholder community, to all of those that are still not there, and also to spread the word. So if you think that people in your work centers could be interested in this, so please share the link. I will share the link right now, also here in the chat, so that you can receive our updates of the products that we will be producing, so research outputs, but also some guidance documents, and there are a few already in the production phase right now. So thank you again. Thank you to everyone, and looking forward to meet some of you in presence. I agree, this could be much better in presence, but doing this online also allows having more people here. Thank you and have a safe day. Bye-bye.